Mr. President, honor all members of this distinguished household, fellow guests, distinguished most of them. I thank you for the invitations, and I think it's my pleasure and perhaps my duty to advocate and oppose these notions to quoting put this House believes genetic engineering undermines the nature of humanities. I will rather argue on the very contrary that genome editing in general and gene therapies in particular restore rather than undermine humanities. I will also argue that genome engineering and genetics is a technologies and technologies cannot do anything per se. They cannot benefit nor they can actually undermine humanity, but rather is the occasional misguided use thereof by humans, and that is to blame, not the technology itself. Indeed, science and technologies do not undermine humans like some people might. Gene therapies have been, are being, and will continue to be developed and implemented in the clinic and in the laboratory to correct faulty versions of human genetic sequences in patients that are afflicted by genetic disease. Our goal with these powerful technologies is to restore their humanity, not undermine it. The intent is to replace their faulty genetic anomalies in those patients affected by genetic disease with the corresponding sequence from the rest of humanity. Sequences and versions that they are in each, and most of you perhaps not of you today. So our goal here today is to cure disease, and we are doing a fantastic job with this. CRISPR technologies in particular as of today has been supported by nearly 10,000 scientific studies, 9,000 of which have come in the last 5 years. This is arguably, perhaps unquestionably, the most powerful technologies in biology in the past generation. It is now in the hand of an estimated 1 million geneticists around the world, with 100,000 adjusted constructs distributed to academics through our planet Earth in 81 different countries. That technologies, engineering in general, gene therapies in particular, has shown tremendous and unprecedented promise to cure genetic disease and restore humanity in patients that beg for it, whether you have Duchenne muscular dystrophy, cystic fibrosis, hemophilia, sickle cell anemia, thalassemia, and on and on. Hundreds of genetic diseases that affect humanities can be restored, not undermined, using those technologies. Given the mission of the NIH, and I quote, to prevent, detect, diagnose, and treat disease in liability, as well as some of the objectives of your own Department of Health and Social Care to maximize health and economic productivity. Are we not compelled as a society? Are we not compelled as a society to enable people to be cured, to save patients that want to restore their humanities, especially those in the back for cures, those that ask for cures, those that need those cures, and in particular patients that have provided consent as adults or guardians? Who are we to tell them whether we are not undermining their humanity by correcting their DNA with correct versions? They are. Okay, so I will take the questions. So indeed, we will discuss today throughout the preceding differences between somatic implementations and patients that ask for the cure, and the embryo-based version of subsequent generation impact. Point taken. So, I may certainly entertain the talks that In some cases, such as dual-use designer babies, perhaps one may misuse these powerful technologies. Let me clearly point out, however, but again, that the technologies itself do not impact the natures of humanity, but rather to people implementing it. The scientists implementing it and the people ask for it. And we hear today about the very natures of humankind with my subsequent speaker in a position of this notion. So, I would argue that it is not technologies, but rather people who may undermine humanity's, certainly not genome editing. Now, as you user myself and as a scientist and as an educator, let me open on behalf of some of those users. I am a professor of food science at NC State University, and I run the CRISPR Lab. Hashtag CRISPR Lab at CRISPR Lab. I am a scientist involved in multiple commercial entities that aim every day to cure disease and restore humanity in patients. I am also a father of 3 children, and this influence is what I do and what kind of science I'm partying. And I'm also a taxpayer, which I hope most of you are, and some of my taxpayers' money is earmarked to fund medical research and manage public health care, and restoring humanity is certainly a part of what I hope the taxpayers in the US and globally is going towards. Now I want access personally to those technologies for myself, for my family, for my children, for my parents, for my friend, and for all of you in the audience here to have the options if you want to use the technologies to alter your genome, especially if you are affected by a genetic disease. And I'm going to question whom in this hall would want to take this right away from me. Now, as the editor-in-chief of the CRISPR journal, I also want to ensure that I take great care and attention to engaging in an open dialogue about the technologies to be inclusive, and this is why I'm here tonight listening to both sides of the aisle, and my duties as journal chief editor is to bring stakeholders to the table, have proper conversations, to have a proper debate and engage into stewardship, not because technology is dangerous or against humanity, but because some people, they may be ones to blame. So what we need is a responsible set of guidelines, so that as a society we can design the guardrails and the speed limits that should control the scientists on the science highway. As a matter of fact, the very past week, the Vatican hosted an international conference entitled Unite to Cure, bringing together scientists, patients, talks, and business leaders, and His Holiness Pope Francis himself stated, quote unquote, "We must acknowledge with deep satisfaction the great stride made by scientific research in discovering and making available new cures, especially those related to the delicate problem of rare autoimmune and neurodegenerative disease." The Pope later referred to our duty of care as human. We have a duty of care to care for those who need it and ask for it. And I would argue that this duty of care enables genome editing to again restore rather than undermine humanity. Whether we use CRISPR to treat disease in somatic cells, to address your questions yet again, or to prevent disease in the genome, the technology itself remains the same when it comes to humanity and stewardship. That would argue that the Vatican options should matter even in the house. Lastly, as a food scientist myself, I must bring up other users beneficial to humanity for genome editing applications that support certain data rather than undermine humanities, and point out, in addition to medicine implementations of those technologies in food and agriculture, whether it is in plants or animal and bacteria used across the food supply chain and biotechnologies. We are now in a position to manage challenges to lie before us. An increasing populations, increasing temperatures, decreasing arable land, decreasing water resources, and we need to feed the world. As a food scientist myself, I have spent already 2 decades using these very technologies to provide plentiful, safe, sustainable, tasty, and health-promoting food supply. And my role is to use that technologies to save humanities in spite of some of those individuals. So, in closing, I would urge this House to oppose these motions, whether you agree with me that genome editing itself restore rather than undermine humanities, the patients that beg for it, or whether you will concede that the users might be to blame, not the technology itself. Please oppose these motions. Thank you.